Hi, here's what we covered on day 2 of our online lessons for beginners. We went through our strumming, basic level 1 strumming, our 4 starter chords, C, A minor, F and G7, and then the transition between the difficult chord shapes, which is mainly F and G7. So we're going to go through those now. We're going to use our metronome, 44 beats per minute. And we're going to play 2 bars of each chord, C, A minor, F and G7, just really concentrating on our strumming, making sure that we're going across all the strings nice and evenly, and that we're not too aggressive and we're not too light either, not too soft. So we want to try and maintain a consistency of 5 out of 10 with our strumming, and try and get a smooth transition between our chord shapes. Using our fingertips to help us create a really good posture, getting our fingers out of the rotor of the other strings, and also does help toward creating a really nice clean sound for us. So here we go. Strumming, 2 bars of each chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. Down straight. And again. I like using my finger to strum with. A minor, and again, F, and again, G7, one more time. Back to C for 2 bars. And again. And stop there. So, some of our guests find it hard to go from one chord to the next, and it's mainly F to G7. So a suggestion is just to spend a little bit of time, and only a minute or so, just getting used to that shape F and moving it to the G7. So using that as an exercise. And you can do it without even strumming. F, G7, F, G7, F, G7. And what we're trying to do is get our fingers used to landing on the strings at the same time. So that is one way to help us remember the transition action between F and G7. Other ways are visualizing, closing your eyes and actually visualizing the F chord and then moving to the G7 without even having your hand on your ukulele. Another way that I'm a visual person, so another way that's really helped me is looking at the shape and really trying to, memorize that particular shape, F, and then, studying it enough to work out what are the mechanics to go to G7. Okay, the second finger has to come down to one string, same fret, and I'm going to move my hand away from the neck, allowing me enough room to place my third finger down on the first string of the second fret. Getting used to that action. So I'm using my eyes to help me memorize the shapes. Now I'm going to introduce a strum, just one strum on each. You know what you could do also is look away from your fingers and see if you can play the shape that way. Whatever's going to help you memorize your chord shapes easily or easier. I hope you can find some ways, and if you do, I'd love to hear what they are. But those are ways that certainly help me. You can't ignore the fact that going nice and slow is a really key ingredient as well. The slower, for me anyway, the slower pace I went, the easier it was for me to absorb all that information, where my fingers were going. It really allowed me enough time to work out, you know, exactly what movements had to happen. So I was looking for any way that I could speed up the memory or the memorizing of whatever I was about to learn. And because once I had it in my memory bank, when I picked up my ukulele, it was game over, half the job was done. Okay, so we went through that. Nice, easy strumming. We did look at some new chord shapes as well, so let's look at those chord shapes. Now with these chord shapes, the same rule applies. Play them nice and slowly. Use whatever ideas or strategies you have to help memorize those chord shapes. And also we're going to try and put some strumming into it, and we're just going to take the same principle from strumming, level 1 strumming, and move it into these chord shapes, and just really take our time, try and bring in some more chords into our repertoire of chords. So we're going to start with a G chord. Then we're going to move to an A chord. Then an A7. A D major. Now I use my favourite shape. One finger across all the strings on the 2nd fret, and my 4th finger 3 frets up on the 1st string. Now whilst that is my favourite shape, what I mean is I love the fact that I can use my 1st finger across all the strings, and getting used to that shape just opened up a lot of possibilities for me to play many other chord shapes, as we'll find out over the next couple of weeks. So we've got a D chord, and the traditional way to play D, using 3 fingers. A D7. 2 ways to play D7. Here's another way. D minor. D minor is like an F chord, so play an F and then move your hand away from the neck a little bit. Add your 3rd finger to fret number 2 to string number 3 underneath the 2nd finger. To an E. Now if you play a D chord and move that shape forward toward the sound hole, 2 frets, 1, 2, that's E. And I'll show you how we get to E. So we play D, and the next fret forward is D sharp or E flat, and the next fret forward is E. So you may have noticed, so we've got D here, move up 2 frets, that's E, and this fret in between has a name. It's D sharp. It has 2 names, D sharp or E flat. So if you say sharp, you're moving forward, so D sharp, move forward 1 fret. If you say flat, you're moving back 1 fret, so E flat or D sharp. Okay, so we've got D, D sharp, E. Now if you take off your little finger and just play the 3 top strings, that's E also. As soon as you play this note, it becomes an E6, which is good for some songs, not for a lot. As soon as you add this note, it becomes E7. Now we're going to add our 3rd finger on the 1st string of the 6th fret, and that becomes a E major 7th. And then when we put our 4th finger back, it's an E major chord. So very cool. Got a few different names just by adding 1 note or making 1 note different. Now we're going to go to E minor. Nice, really nice looking chord shape and sounding as well. Now it looks like a staircase. Really, really nice chord shape and pretty easy to get used to. And we've got an E7, E minor 7. Now E minor 7, only 2 fingers, and it's part of the G chord family. So if you play your G chord, just remove your 3rd finger, and that's an E minor 7 chord. So I'm going to go through them again, just very quickly. G, A, A7, D, D, D7, D7, D minor, E, E6, E or E6, E minor, and E minor 7. So a lot of big chord shapes there. The question is, how do you remember these chord shapes? So I'm going to suggest you pick, they're in 3 rows, maybe just pick 1 row and go through each of those nice and slow. Play your G chord, A, maybe just 1 strum for now, A7, nice and easy, just remove your 2nd finger, and then D, the traditional way, 3 fingers. Alright, and then you can maybe go backwards, start with D, and then A7, A, and then G. And you could maybe mix them up and time yourself. I call it the chord game. Mix up the chords, so write them in an order, and just put your timer on and see how quickly you can go through the chord shapes. Now it's not about speed, it's about the quality of your sound. But as soon as you get a nice sound, you can move to the next chord. So I'll give you an example. If I'm playing the first line, I'll go A7, A, D, and G. So A7, happy with that sound. A, D, and G. The chord game. And you can do that with all these other rows of chord shapes as well. So the idea is to start learning some new chord shapes. And the best one is the one with the 1st finger across all the strings. I love it because it allows me to be able to play anywhere on the fretboard. And we'll get to that before our 6-week period is over. So with those chords, just take your time, but you do need to spend, a couple of minutes on trying to learn them. When it comes to practice, try and practice minimum 5 minutes a day. And you just need to pick a subject. You might say, okay, I'm going to work on my chord transitions for 5 minutes right now and work out what chords they are. It might only be 2 chords, so it might be G to A. And if you achieve a nice clean sound and a reasonably good transition between both within 5 minutes, then that's what we're after. Now we're going to look at a finger exercise I call the Holy Grail. It is amazing. It really did lift my playing up a couple of levels once I started playing it, and I noticed a difference in my ability within 12 months of doing this. It wasn't a subtle difference, it was a major difference. And what it does is it gets you using all your fingers. It builds each muscle in all those fingers, dexterity, independence, and coordination between both hands, and also control. Accuracy, so many benefits in this exercise, and so let's get into it. Okay, so we're going to start with our 1st finger on the 1st fret of the 4th string, and we're going to do a downstroke with our thumb. Then we're going to place our 2nd finger, 2nd fret, 4th string. Then our 3rd finger, 3rd fret, 4th string. then our fourth finger, fourth fret, fourth string. So that's what we're heading toward, a nice, clean note. And we want to let that note ring. We don't want short staccato notes. We want nice, long notes. Because it takes muscle for us to hold our fingers down to allow that note to ring, especially nice and clean. Our thumb is working overtime in the back here, but that's the exercise or part of it. So we start with our first finger on the first fret of the fourth string, and then once we get to our fourth finger, we move down to the next string and do the exercise again, starting with our first finger on the first fret and move through the 4 frets, then move down to the next string. And what we want is nice, clean sounding notes, long, clean sounding notes. Alright, so we start here and all the way down to the bottom string, and then once we get there, we actually go backwards, starting with our fourth finger and going 4, 3, 2, 1. When we get to our first finger, we jump up to the next string and start again 4, 3, 2, 1. Same again, up to the next string, 3, 2, 1. And again, fourth string, 2, 1. Great exercise. Let's go for it. And let's try our metronome at 44 beats per minute. I think that might be a bit fast. I'm going to do it at 40 beats per minute. I'll count us in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Downstroke. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next string. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next string. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And backwards. 4, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1. Up to the next string. 4, 3, 2, 1. Next string. 4, 3, 2, 1. So there you have it, the Holy Grail. 40 beats per minute. Try it and let me know how you go. Now I know there is definitely going to be some sounds you don't want to hear. And it's going to be out of time. But that will only happen for a couple of times, just until you get used to the concept. Are you going to be playing the wrong strings? And how do I know? Because I did all of that myself. And once you get used to it, try committing to do it down and back twice, at least a day. And don't worry too much about, like I said, don't worry if it's not perfect. We're not after perfect. We just want the concept of the exercise, getting used to it, and then developing our muscle, our control, so that it eventually ends up being nice and smooth and clean. And that's what we're after.